There's the port. Welcome back to part 2 of Quarantine Reviews. It's been a couple of weeks, I've been on some walks, and watched yet another 9 movies. Because my unhealthy obsession with ratings is ruining my life, I'll be reviewing each one, starting on my least favourite, working through to my favourite. And again, these reviews will be completely spoiler-free. Let's go! That took four minutes.
I'm Spencer, that's my name.
I thought I'd give The Host a go to get a taste of Bong Joon-ho's other films beside Parasite, and I can say confidently I wasn't as fond of this one. This film was particularly interesting to watch under today's context, considering how it's from 14 years ago and is mostly set under quarantine. Something about it as a whole though just felt a bit sloppy to me. I found the second act quite tedious to sit through, like the film couldn't actually decide what it was going for. Anything it tried to say about matters like pollution or governments felt a bit on the nose as well. I think this film just felt too messy in its direction for me to enjoy much. I do remember finding the last 20 minutes or so entertaining, though the visual effects in this film really do vary between decent and dated. Something about it as a whole just doesn't really work for me. This one gets a 5.5 out of 10.
Hating that music on my thing.
I feel like this film tries to be liked more than it deserves to be, if that makes any sense. What it has going for it is a few memorable scenes that make you stop and think, yeah, this says something interesting about life. Overall though, this film is kind of messy as well. Almost every problem that any character faces is resolved in such an anticlimactic way. There's multiple points when a situation's unfolding, and it feels like it's going to get nasty, and then in the next scene it's abruptly solved, but rarely in a satisfying way, mostly in one that just makes you think, I guess that's not an issue anymore. It does end on a strong note though, and despite being a minor character, Forest Whitaker specifically stood out as being pretty great in this movie. I'd almost recommend it for its best moments. It's a shame it feels quite unfinished as a whole. Smoke gets a 6 out of 10.
So many colors, so much fun.
Hold up, let's set the record straight here. You're expecting me to do a critical analysis of Bill and Ted. What do you take me for? Some sort of snob that wants to rid the world of all fun? They're just a pair of goofy 90s comedies. And you know what? I quite enjoyed them. They're both quite charming, fun to watch, and both have some nice set design for what they are. This doesn't mean they aren't a little dated at times. The first one did make me wince twice, but only a little, when they say the funny number that makes Redditors laugh.
69, dudes!
And I also cringed a bit when Abe Lincoln screams, "Party on, dudes," but hey, it's the 90s. Shut up. I think I preferred the second film over the first. Bogus Journey just gets so strangely wild, and I think it got more laughs out of me than the first one. My only real beef with Bill and Ted is I'm not a fan of the cheesy rock bands these films are an ode to, like Kiss, but hey, good bands like Primus still make a cameo, so it's not all doom and gloom. These films, I'd give them a 6.5.
Making friends with everyone.
For a movie this creative and on par with Hollywood quality, to come out of a Soviet satellite state in the early 70s is quite impressive, I think. This film has aged really well for the most part, and it's shot quite beautifully, except maybe one scene where they couldn't figure out how to get realistic rain overlay. It's not hard, just pour a watering can in front of the lens. Solaris is particularly effective at building unsettling atmospheres, plus the set design and location choice all look brilliant, and visually ground this as an essential sci-fi classic. The only thing keeping me from rating this higher is so far I haven't found it as deep as people have made it out to be, and maybe a few metaphors have gone over my head. This film is supposed to make you think, and I'm gonna be honest, after only my first watch, I'm really struggling to find any deeper meaning in it than, where's the line between reality and delusions? For that to be the only reading I've gathered out of a 3-hour movie feels a little surface level to me. I'll probably need to rewatch it another time to fully understand what it's trying to say. It's with no doubt a work of art, but I'm not sure I 100% get it yet. For now, this gets an 8. The Deer Hunter gave me a deep-cut flashback to a video I watched 9 years ago called Tinky Winky Gets Shot, and this reopened ancient valves in my brain. Real shit though, when this film finished, my initial thoughts were, is that it? Apart from the famous scene, I wasn't really blown away by the rest. But as I started typing up a disappointed review, causing me to think about it in greater detail, I began to notice more and more things that actually make this film quite brilliant. At first, I thought this film paints a pretty one-sided picture of the Vietnam War, but thinking about it made me realise that that's kind of missing the point. It's quite the opposite. If anything, this is a film that offers a pretty unique perspective of the war compared to others I've seen. It focuses more on the impact the war had on your everyday communities and individuals, less so on the war itself, and it does a good job of making these themes hit closer to home. I will say though, not knowing what I was getting into, this movie didn't do an amazing job of hooking me. I won't pretend that half-hour wedding scene didn't bore me a bit. I also didn't feel as connected to the characters as this movie probably expected me to be, but that might just be my fault. Overall though, this film did make me think, which is a good sign that it's going to age well with future rewatches. I'm going to give this one an 8 as well.
Climbing up a musical ladder.
Who knew that dogfighting would make such an effective backdrop for a series of interesting stories? After finishing this film, I immediately had to check IMDb trivia to make sure I hadn't just watched a genuine dog snuff film. Indeed, no animals were actually harmed, it was just really good filmmaking. Whew! I was slow to get into this one, worrying that it would just be edgy and ugly for the sake of it, but I'm glad I kept watching, because this film just kept getting better and better as it went on and the full story came together. It's a pretty damn memorable movie about a single event that links together 3 stories involving dogs and the theme of loss. My favourite of the 3 was probably the one following this bedraggled looking geezer, who's half as overgrown as us by the time this lockdown finishes. I highly recommend this one. Despite the producers having a concerning amount of dog corpses at hand, it's filled with really powerful scenes. An 8 or an 8.5 out of 10.
Rushing and it just can't stop.
From one film that overuses the word dude to another, I rewatched The Big Lebowski. I'm going to be real here. I have quite an emotionally traumatic history with this film. We're gonna have to go back in time yet again, from current functioning member of society me to the 14-year-old pillock version of myself, which is when The Big Lebowski brought me to the verge of insanity. My deranged young self watched this movie twice in 1 week, and I fucking hated it with a passion both times. For 3 years I had myself convinced that The Big Lebowski is the most overrated piece of motion picture trash on this planet. A couple of weeks ago I gave it a spin for the 3rd time to see if I still hold this controversial view. And to my surprise, it was a whole new experience. A thoroughly enjoyable one. Like, I'm still shocked just how drastically my opinions changed. I laughed multiple times. Some of the visuals in this are so clever and hilariously achieved. I think this film is a perfect example of how I've ruined countless classics for myself by watching them all as a dumbass child, when I was unable to follow the simplest narratives. That's why I hated it so much. I didn't understand it, and I took my frustration out on it. Well, that and one other reason. The annoying fans of this film that overquote certain lines make my blood boil to this day. Anyone that says, "Well, that's just like your opinion, man," or "the dude abides," sounds so f***ing obnoxious to me. Just shut the f*** up, you're not funny or original. Phew, good to get that out of my system. But yeah, I do really like this film now, and its vast array of vibrant characters. The only issue with it that still remains to this day for me is I'm not the biggest fan of the ending, but whatever. The journey here makes up for the destination. Today, this film for me is an 8.5 or maybe a 9.
Everyone's a special friend of mine.
From only the first minute, I could tell this was going to be fantastic. Scorsese does not miss. There's something so satisfying about watching billionaire empires collapsing in on themselves, especially filmed with so much style. The music choice, mwah. What a way to swoon me by utilising Devo in such a classy way. Joe Pesci absolutely steals the show here. This man's charisma is through the roof. Love him, love the dialogue, love this film. This is cinema. If I had to pick one flaw, staying vague, I think some of the wife stuff in the latter half goes on for a bit too long, which you'll only understand if you've seen it. Maybe you'd even disagree. And Casino gets a 9 from me.
Make a little eyes go pop.
Starting this list on a Bong Joon-ho film, and finishing it on a Bong Joon-ho film, I rewatched Parasite to show it to my parents, and I probably liked it even more the second time round. It's funny when it wants to be, it's extremely tense when it aims to be, it's entertaining all the way through, has an effective soundtrack, and at the moment, it's probably one of my favourite films, period. If you still haven't had a chance to see this, and still know nothing about the plot, go in knowing as little as you can. It's grown on me a lot since my first cinema viewing, and I think it conveys its messages a lot better than the host does. It's films like this one that restore my faith in cinema, especially in the rare case when a genuine, non-pandering, non-English movie like Parasite can take all the glory at the Oscars in this Disney-fied age. After my first viewing, I initially gave this a strong 8, but after a second, I can confirm that this film is in fact a 10 out of 10 for me. And there you have it, another 9 reviews from my monotonous voice. If you want to see the full up-to-date ranking, there's a link in the description to the Letterboxd list. Very likely I'll be making a part 3, so stick around if you want either that or some short films like Operation Screamlove. But yeah, thanks for watching, subscribe, like, yada da, goodbye. That was a pathetic outro.